Well, I am upfront a Snyder fan. I know a lot of the Snyder fans are getting a bad reputation for attacking everything with the James Gunn Superman. I'm not like that. I do think there are promising aspects. I've said this in many other videos to be consistent. I think Lois looks great. I think Lex is very credible. And some of the behind the scenes with Metamorpho and some of the other characters looks promising. But again, a lot of the doubts and skepticism by the Snyder fandom, I think, is also legit. That, yeah, the plot here is very similar to Man of Steel, very similar to BVS, which is normal in Hollywood. You borrow ideas, but it is very close. And certain ideas, certain jokes, certain threads, I'm like, I don't know about this. I don't know about this. There's this now iconic selfie thing where this girl is doing a selfie while Superman is battling the Hammer of Boravias or whatever that is. And listen, the hammer looks great. That looks interesting, but why is she taking a selfie? Well, it's James Gunn. He's got to James Gunn it. So, and again, I like James Gunn. I don't hate James Gunn. I want to work for James Gunn. I want to work in Hollywood on with the DC projects. But my verdict is I'm still kind of pessimistic. But now let's get into the main story, which is tied to the Gunverse, which is this new lawsuit. Now, there was a prior lawsuit by, well, basically the creators of Superman. I mean, these are the people who made Superman. So I can understand that they want legitimate claim to the profits, the merchandising, and everything. They did make Superman, but the prior lawsuit was dismissed. It didn't go anywhere. And now we have a new lawsuit by one of the co creators, because Superman was created by two men. It's a very interesting story with them. This one is by Joe's family. So you feel very heartbroken about this because if you do know comic book history, and I study it at a very high level, it is really shocking how many comic book creators, writers, artists really don't get anywhere close to the recognition, money, or what they deserve from what they worked on these books. I mean, it's astonishing that doing this very little work, which seems kind of small, creating these characters does lead to these billion-dollar empires, and the actual creators often died in poverty, obscurity, getting no awards, no recognition, not even formal recognition that who created it was created by these people. Like they have to fight for that. Like DC Comics is not just say, "Oh yes, we recognize." Nope. I mean, now for all of history, they are recognized. That's good, but I can understand that they want more recognition and more money, frankly, because Superman is very lucrative. It's a very lucrative franchise, and also this is probably what's playing a bigger role into this. It's going to fall into the public domain, right? Creations are yours for a long time, but they will eventually fall into the public domain. And Superman is going to be in the public domain in a couple years. It's not far off in the future. In a couple years, everyone can put out their version of Superman, their version of Batman. We're already here, so I can understand the family wants to get the last bit of recognition and money. I do understand, but it is what it is. And although I'm very skeptical of what they're going to do with Superman this summer, this is what it is. It is very cynical. Obviously, if they had an issue with the creator rights, they could have just filed this years ago. But the problem with that would be, of course, they can't hold this as a negotiating tactic. And again, let's be very clear here: the WB, DC Comics, it's a business. This is all business. So it is just better negotiating tactic that they have the lawsuit now, and they can delay Superman coming out in certain territories. It's not affecting all countries, but it's going to affect certain countries like Ireland, the UK, and Australia. And that's money that clearly Warner Brothers wants. And now with this lawsuit, they'll have to be like, okay, you can say whatever you please, but you may not be able to present this film in those countries until this lawsuit is resolved. Now, it could be this lawsuit will be dismissed very early on. They're like, this is not really a legit issue. This has already been ruled upon. What's the point of this? But again, if they do have a substantive case, then courts will hear this, and it possibly the July 11th, whatever theatrical release, they're going to have to play with that. Now, granted, this is all normal Hollywood business. Some countries, for whatever reason, get very early previews. Some countries, it's more delayed. It's a bit all over the place, whatever due to contracts, marketing campaigns, many different reasons. But clearly, this lawsuit is meant to impede the upcoming Superman film. Again, it's nothing personal against James Gunn. It is a DC company, so it's really that which is in question, right? It's the family that helped create Superman versus Warner Brothers, right? And the Superman film is just in the middle, which James Gunn created. Again, if even if you don't like James Gunn, clearly the family is trying to put his film in a difficult position. It is sadly a messed up situation all around, but I just don't see how this lawsuit is going to help. I honestly don't think it's even going to be successful. So it is a tragedy what's happened to a lot of comic book creators. This is even happening with the Ironheart. Apparently, one of the co-creators is really mad that Marvel and the MCU is not giving enough recognition and or money for the co-creation of Ironheart. And again, it's obviously a little silly comparing Ironheart to Superman. I mean, one is a massive icon that is globally recognized versus, Ironheart. But the principle is the same that, yeah, comic book creators overall have been shafted by the industry. It's just a very tragic story, and it does continue that a lot of creators are just not given their proper due for what they create. And that is a tragedy, but again, it is a little suspicious. They're filing this lawsuit this year just to impede the progress of Superman. And I'm very nervous what they're doing with Superman, but really, why should James Gunn suffer because of these larger rights issues with DC Comics? It's actually kind of ironic, too, because from what I understand, DC Comics is a little bit better on the whole than even Marvel or the MCU. So it's a little interesting that technically Marvel is the worst company. But DC is slightly better, but it's still getting sued. So, it is what it is. It is what it is. There's also the dilemma that I've noted that Superman itself is going to fall into the public domain. So even if the lawsuit is successful, well, the actual claim to rights is only going to last a few years more, and that's it, right? It's also an added irony that these creators are Canadian, right? And the way I understood Canadian rights, they actually expire sooner than American rights. So it's very confusing and very odd. So at the end of the day, what does this mean for the Superman fandom? I don't think it means very much. I think, again, should the co-creators here be recognized? They are. I mean, I can remember with Smallville, they were clearly credited. I'll go back and double check, but they've been credited for the most part. So I don't think it's lack of recognition. However, there's also the question of money. And Superman is massive. It is just a massive brand. So there is something to be said for them getting proper reward for what they created. But people have to also recognize that Superman that most people recognize, the guy who flies in the air, has all these powers, kryptonite, so on and so forth, that is not what they created. They created a very early version of Superman. The Superman most people love or recognize or are intense about, that is an adaptation. That is something that they created slowly, decade after decade, with many other creators. Like, people just assume that the whole thing with Superman, oh, truth, justice, American way, that was not part of the character at the beginning. So the character has just been altered in many key ways that we consider that the version of Superman, but that is not the original version that they created. But still, to be accurate, they did create the foundation we now use for Superman, but they didn't create the actual modern day Superman. That is another entire matter. In fact, it's ironic that when people think of Superman, they think about Christopher Reeves, frankly. And the Christopher Reeves Superman, which is one I really love, is not the one they created. That is a totally different version. So it's a very interesting thing about comic book history colliding with legal history that they're actually debating this original version of Superman, not the modern day version. So I'm with the family in principle, but I think we should recognize they did not create modern Superman. They created a very original version of Superman, and that is radically different. Whether it would be as popular or well received as the current version, I highly doubt. I think most people would be like, wow, that's the version of Superman they made? Yeah, it's very different. It's a very interesting prototype, but it is a different fish entirely. And there we are. So I do hope the family gets justice, but you can't help but wonder that this lawsuit is being a little cynical in the way it's being strategically presented.